What's up? Bartending Pro here. In this episode, I strap a camera to my chest and show you how I set up my actual bar for an opening day shift. You'll most likely work many day shifts on your way up the bartending food chain and will most likely continue to work them throughout your career. So here I'm going to take you behind my bar and show you a point of view angle from a GoPro camera and walk you through 15 basic steps of setting up most any bar. One thing you need to remember is that each bar layout will be different, so expect some variance in this demo versus where you may actually work or how you set up your bar. So again, this is just a simple overview of the basic steps that will generally take place when setting up most bars. So step one is to clock in. This sounds ridiculous, but pretty much every bartender I've ever worked with has made the mistake of coming in and starting to work for a half an hour or even an hour before they clock in. Step two is you need to count the cash drawer. Now, every establishment is going to have a different amount. Usually it's around $200 or $300, but the first thing you need to do is to count it when you get there to make sure that it's not short. And it's very rare, but it does happen, so that if it's short, you need to get it right and get it to whatever number it's supposed to be so that you can start from scratch and make sure that your books will be correct. Step three is to clean your bar. Now, every night your bar should be cleaned before you leave as part of the closing duties, but there's still times when you need to come in and just buff stuff out that wasn't quite maybe clean to the level it should have been the night before. So you usually just want to grab a rag, wet it down, put some cleaning solution on it, and then just give a quick once over on any of the surfaces that might need a little extra buffing and attention before you open for the day when customers come in. Next, you need to put your soda guns together. So these are little holsters that hold them, and they're kind of pull down and twist with your left hand while pushing the top down with your right hand. And then you need to put the little funnels onto the soda gun, and I'll use kind of the edge of the bar to push it on there because it's pretty tight, but then that's all you got to do and they're all set. You need to do this for every one of your soda gun locations, basically however many wells you have in your bar, and they'll all be basically the same thing. Sometimes they'll go on and then twist and lock, otherwise they'll just push straight on. Next thing we need to do is put ice in our wells, and before we do that we should usually rinse it down with water just to make sure there's no dirt or grime or anything left in there from the night before. Then you go to the ice machine and you fill up your buckets. One thing that's important to remember about the ice machines is you always need to knock the buildup of ice down because it will build up and then kind of freeze and then get stuck, but you need your ice machine to be filling up the ice to the proper levels when you're taking it out, so remember to knock it down. Then basically you just dump the ice into the wells. Sometimes they'll take 1 to 1.5 or maybe 2 of these buckets depending on the size, and then you're ready to rock and roll with some ice. Your bar mats are basically these big rubber and mesh plastic pieces that are designed to just catch any spillage and help keep the bar clean and keep things from sliding around, giving them some grip and whatnot. So usually they're just big rubber mats, and you kind of place these out, and when you get hired at a place we'll train you on how they're supposed to set these things up. You just kind of just little puzzle pieces and you put them together in whatever shapes you want and you need, and set up your garnishes, trays, and everything around those, and you'll have them above each well in your bar. Prepping garnishes is an important part, obviously, of the day bartender shift because you're going to be responsible for making sure that everything's ready for the day and the night. So one thing you do is like cherries, depends on the bar. Here I'm going to do cherries. You want to put a little bit of juice anytime you have these. I'm putting olives in there, so you just throw a few in the trays, and then also make sure there's a little bit of olive juice in there. Cutting some lemons, and you can watch another video. This is cutting half wheels. I'm not going to go into the full explanation of how to cut all these. This is a lime that I'm cutting as wedges, so watch another video if you want a little more detail about how to cut these specifically. Basically you're just going to be doing all the prep that you need in your specific bar, enough to just get open, and sometimes you'll have a machine like this that can cut wedges, so it'll save you a lot of time so you don't have to hand cut a million limes, although we'll all have to do that. Other things you might have is like cilantro or parsley, cucumbers. Again, it just really depends on the type of cocktails. One thing you almost always have is mint, and I like to just pull it off the stem and then pinch the top. and usually nice leafy. Just pull the leaves off and then pinch the top. Oranges, you can do the same way. I'll cut them like half wheels, and then I'll cut them again so they're like a quarter wheel. Once we've prepped all our garnishes, then we need to put them in the trays. So again, usually go back in the dishwashing station and grab the large trays and then the small white trays that go inside that hold everything. Generally, they will hold 6 of these little trays inside the larger tray itself. And this is why you prep your garnishes first, because then you can just kind of dump them in there and set these out. And you want to put one of these in every well that you have set up. So we need to put our little sugar and salt rimming trays out. Salt here, this is kosher salt. You can put sugar, it just depends on your bar. You might have a few different items put in there. And then to make it stick, usually put lime juice, or you can use just a little squirt of sweet and sour. Will basically do the same trick. I also like to set out my straws when I put out these trays. So obviously we're in a bar, so we need to have our liquor bottles out on the floor. Now sometimes your bottles might just stay where they're at and you clean them, they stay on the shelves, they might not move anywhere, but you usually have to put them into your well, double checking that you don't have doubles. So here I'm supposed to have a bottle of rum. But you just set these out so that you have quick access to the bottles that you need when you're making cocktails. How they're placed and where they're placed will just depend on your bar. So here is if you have food served at your restaurant. You need to have salt and pepper shakers, you need to have napkins out, any sort of condiments and stuff. Here's a cool little trick. You can kind of make a swirl effect with your napkins. Just rub it around your arm one way, flip it over, and then keep rubbing the same direction, and it'll give it this cool little spiral effect. And then just make sure that you pull the napkin off the top and the bottom so that they're clean. And set out your coasters, Tabasco, hot sauce, ketchup, whatever you need at your establishment that you use on a regular basis. Again, obviously if you serve food, you need to make sure that you have the proper utensils set up and ready to go and available for your customers. Backstock, also called a dry storage. This is just where you store any juices, mixes, napkins, straws, anything that you need to store on a shelf but does not need to be refrigerated. This is like simple syrup, grenadine, pina colada mix. Just depends on your establishment, and then you want to make sure that you have a backup of each of these out front in your main bar so that you're ready to have them at your disposal. So we need to check the walk-in fridge for kegs, beers that we need to stock. You might have some cold things back there like ginger beer or champagne. We need to check our bottles of wine that we might need to grab and just kind of get a head count of what we have in the backstock area. Grab some bottles of beers and just make sure everything's ready to go for the shift coming up. One of the last things is we just need to make sure that we have everything stocked that we need. So we'll check our bottles of wine. We'll check our bottles of booze, and these are not necessarily on the floor. These are just backstock of things that you might go through that you need to replenish the bottles as you use them throughout a shift. And again, this will just vary from one location to the next and depending on what you have. So those are the main 15 basic steps of setting up pretty much any bar and should help get you started.